Okay, we're going to learn how to do a battery load test using the VAT-40. And this is old technology, but it does hold true for a lot of the tests that we do. What we're going to go over right now, first thing, is how to rate our batteries, or how to know the rating of them. And with that rating numbers, how do we make this thing work according to each individual and different battery. So we'll take a look at the battery ratings first, and then we'll move over and look at the controls and the displays on the VAT-40. Okay, looking at the top of our battery, our label up here is going to give us a lot of information about this battery. It gives us a part number and it gives us a group size. So it's a BCI is what we use mostly in the United States. Battery Council International Group 48 is what this battery is. That determines the width and the depth of it and the height of it and whatnot. So we know what kind of a car it fits in. We have a cranking amperage at this first number of 765. So this guy should deliver 765 amps at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. When we look at our cold cranking amperage, this battery is rated to deliver 615 amps at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the number, the cold cranking amps, that's the number we're going to use to set up our VAT-40. We'll be using that number here in just a minute. Alright, looking at our VAT-40, let's take a look at some of the controls and the displays on this guy. This is our load knob up here. The more we turn it clockwise, the more the load is going to increase on the battery. We'll use it to determine what sort of amperage we want to draw out of that battery, and we'll read those amperage on this scale. The blue scale goes from 0 to 100, either direction, and the red scale goes from 0 to 500. The way we determine which scale we want to use is by the knob down here on the bottom right. Don't make this complicated. Don't worry about the starting and the charging labels on here. Just look at the red. Do I want to use the red scale, 0 to 500? Or do I want to use the blue scale from 0 to 100? Then set your knob accordingly. Don't worry about the other ones. They're used a lot in diodes and stators and whatnot, but those are other tests down the road. Down on the bottom here, this is our volt scale, 0 to 18 volts. We're going to want to keep track of our volts as we change the load up here, the amperage load on our batteries, and see what our volts are doing. Knob down here in the bottom left, internal volts, which is usually coming from the battery type cables we have going out of here. External, 18 volts, comes from the cables that are tucked away underneath. Hardly ever use those anymore. And if we want to go to external 3 volts down below here, we could do that if we wanted to. Back in the day, this was a pretty advanced setting. Today, we pretty much leave it on internal 18 volt setting. So now let's go ahead and get this thing hooked up to the battery and start our test. Okay, when we take the battery and hook it up to the VAT-40, vice versa, we're going to take the red lead, battery clamp looking lead, and it goes on the positive post, and the negative one's going to go on the negative post. And as soon as we do that, we should see our voltage scale start to climb up. It's reading at just under 13 volts right now. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to get our amperage clamp hooked up to one of these two cables. It doesn't matter if we use the black cable or the red cable. Amp's going out, it's the same coming in. We're going to use this amp clamp on either one. Now if I hook this amp clamp up this way, it may make my needle move one way or the other. And if I turn it over, it'll make the needle go the other way. And I'll show you a quick example of that right now. If I turn this on for a load right now, the needle moves to the right. If I turn this over, put a load on it, gonna move to the left. Okay, doesn't hurt anything. It's accurate either way. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna zoom in on this VAT-40, look at these scales while we're doing the load test on this battery. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and do a load test on this. Remember the cold cranking amperage on that battery? Yeah, 615, right? So we want to load this down to half of that value. So 307 amps is what we're going to turn our load knob till our amp needle moves to about 300, just a touch over 300. We're going to want to hold that there for about 15 seconds. In the meantime, we're going to watch our voltage scale. We don't want it to fall down below 9.6, 9.5, depending upon who you talk to. So let's go ahead and load this guy down to just a little over 300. And he's sitting right at 300 now, just a touch over. And look at our volts sitting there. We want to keep an eye on those volts. We're just below 10. We're about 9.8. We want to keep the amperage by fine-tuning the load knob. We want to keep it at 300 or just a little bit over. We're still at 9.6. Still doing real good with it. Still holding real nice. We're going to leave it there for just a couple more seconds. And that should be good enough. We're at 9.5. Yeah, we're a little bit high on the amp, so we're 9.6 still, which means this battery tested just fine.